Alright, welcome back to part 3 of the Guardian Legend tier lists. This final one in the series for now will be ranking the secondary weapons in the fan game Shadow of Naju based purely on the arcade mode. And the main reason why I wanted to do this as a separate tier was because the obtainable upgrades in arcade mode are different than the base game. Like I mentioned in the second part, a good chunk of the weapons didn't even get upgraded past level 1, and I'm fairly certain I got all of the unlocks in the base game. In arcade mode, your upgrades are tied to how well you do in each corridor stage as it runs back to back. If you max out your score and everything, I believe it's possible to max out all of the levels, at least to level 3. I didn't do it in my successful run, but based on what I've seen, I think the level 4 bullet shot still gets maxed out, but everything else can go up to level 3 if you do well enough. So we're going to rank these here based on an assumed max level purely for arcade mode. And I think we'll find that the overall layout is different than both the base story mode and the original Guardian Legend story mode on NES. So first up, we're going to start with the bullet shield again. Assuming max level for this one, I'm going to put a maxed out bullet shield on B tier. And I say this because at level 3, it's pretty effective at clearing out enemy projectiles. If you wanted to get out of a hairy situation and didn't have erasers, I think it could be useful. Overall, its cost is sort of a deterrent, and I didn't really use this weapon a lot, but had I maxed it out, I probably would have been able to find a use for it. So I'm going to put it at B tier in arcade mode. The bullet shot, again, this one being a potential level 4 projectile, I'm going to put at high B tier again. Specifically in some of the later bosses, once you have the upgrade, it does do decent damage and can allow you to get through fights relatively quickly. So I think it earns a place in B tier, a little bit higher than bullet shield. Next up, the cutter. The path of progressions to be able to max out the cutter doesn't change the fact that it's still not that useful of a weapon. So I'm keeping this one at D tier. I think it's been in D tier in every single one. It just isn't as useful, especially for arcade mode. It's possible it's useful at clearing out enemies, but definitely not for the bosses that show up in that game. I couldn't find a way to make the cutter useful. Next up, enemy erasers. Again, S tier. Their function isn't any different, but given how hard the arcade mode stages get later, you're in a real spot of trouble if you don't have a screen clear. So again, S tier easily for this one. Next up, the fireball. Assuming max level, and again, I didn't get this in my playthrough, I think I only got it to level 2. If the fireball was fully upgraded in arcade mode, I would put it at an S tier. Sort of like I mentioned in the original Guardian Legend playthrough, this weapon maxed out is very, very powerful, and it will take down most enemies and bosses quickly because of its piercing. I would be interested if I did another run for arcade mode and was able to get level 3, how much easier it'd make the later parts of the game. But just based on a max potential upgrade, I'm putting this one at S tier. Next up, the front wave. This one, assuming a max level of 3, which I was able to get in my successful arcade mode run 2. This one is good. I would consider this one high A tier. You get it early on in the game for arcade mode, and it holds its own pretty well through the majority of the game till some of the later stages when the enemy waves get a little bit thick. But the speed of the projectile, its damage, and function are very good. I would put the front wave for arcade mode at a high A tier. For the grenade, again, we're only talking about corridor stages for arcade mode, and the grenade really, even at level 3, I don't think can keep up with the speed of the bosses along with the enemy waves. It's just too slow. So I'm actually going to drop down the grenade to C tier for arcade mode. I didn't really use this one at all. I tried on a couple bosses, but because you're rated for speed of clearing around in addition to score and damage, you can't rely on the grenade for fast DPS, and as a result, it's not that useful. Next up, the laser. The laser remains a very, very important weapon for arcade mode. Assuming a max level, I'm going to put the laser on S tier after the fireball. Again, I got this one to level 2 in my run 2 on arcade mode. I didn't get to level 3, but I think at level 3, this one would be one of the best weapons in arcade mode, hands down. Maybe even more so than the fireball because it's fast and pierces. The fireball, being a slightly bigger projectile, can hit things easier. I think it'd be a situational toss-up between these two, but assuming a max level of 3, laser's S tier, definitely. Next up, we have the lightning, a new weapon for Shadow of Naju. I don't remember if I got this one to max level in my second run. I do know that I never used it because it's just too long of a projectile. There's too much time in between the waves as it shoots out, and you're getting mobbed by all sides in arcade mode. So I'm going to put lightning on D tier for arcade mode. It's possible at level 3 it does a lot of damage and takes up enough space that it's better, but I didn't use it in my playthrough, so I'm going to put it down here pretty low. Next up, we have the mine. In a similar vein, I'm going to put this one at the bottom of D tier. I think I got this one to level 2 or 3 in my successful run, probably level 2. I didn't max out all the upgrades in my successful arcade mode run. We're just assuming a max level from a functional perspective, but from a functional perspective, the mine is kind of garbage, so I'm going to leave it down here at D tier. Next up, the repeller. This one I did get to level 3 in run 2, and this particular weapon came in handy against a ton of bosses, and even the final boss. I would put this one at low S tier after the laser. Depending on what you're fighting, if it's something that follows a predictable path and you can sort of guide the enemy or boss into the path of the repeller projectiles it's spinning up the screen, it does stack on the damage pretty well, and overall I use this weapon a lot. I would say at max level it's up there with these other 3. Next up, we have the saber. Again, I don't remember if I maxed this one out, but assuming a level 3 weapon, I'd put this one on high B tier above the bullet shield. This weapon came in handy against the sort of side-to-side scrolling turret boss, or laser battery boss. I get in its face and just spam saber, and it burned the boss down relatively quickly. Overall, it sort of functioned as a niche weapon. Again, I don't think I got this one to level 3. It's possible. I just don't remember because the end of the filming was a while ago. But the situational nature of the saber, I think, puts it at a B tier. It's got its uses. Next up, we have the Seekers. This weapon I did not max out on my playthrough, but assuming a total max upgrade of level 3, I would put the Seekers at the top of A tier, ahead of the front wave, just because this would have been a useful weapon against several bosses, knowing what I know now. I would be curious to see how the later stages play out and when you're able to max out the level on the Seekers, but again, assuming max level, I put them at the top of A tier. Very powerful weapon and useful against some difficult bosses. And last but not least, the side wave. My opinion is not any different on this particular one. It's going straight into D tier, but ahead of the mine as far as functionality. Overall, Again, not a weapon I used even if it was assumed to be max level. So I think that will do it for Shadow of Naju arcade mode. The spread, and I don't have the image from the base game, but the spread is a little bit different. I think we have some more weapons ranking in the higher tiers just because they're assumed to be max level in arcade mode. Overall, it is interesting to see where everything sort of falls depending on the conditions, like upgrade caps in the base game versus being able to fully upgrade everything in arcade mode. But for those that have tried arcade mode and beaten it and found their preferred weapons when they used, if you have a different tier list, but again, like I've said in the previous parts, by all means, give this a try, rank them, and let me know what you think. It's always an interesting discussion. But I think that'll do it for this series of tiers. I'm going to be doing some brainstorming in the meantime about other tier lists I want to make. I think a lot of YouTubers have really sort of done a lot of the common ones, like, you know, favorite Nintendo games or favorite movies or something like that. I think I want to focus on tier lists that not everyone has done or covered. Maybe something like Monster Hunter weapons or something else. I'll have to think about it and see. But in the meantime, thanks for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video.